Hey guys, what's up? It's Eric with Advanced Level Automotive. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to part 6 of Project Purple Rain. Now, I know a lot of you guys have been waiting quite some time for this video. Let me start by apologizing to you guys. I am sorry, this is taking a lot longer than expected. Right now, the main reason is because parts are so hard to get for this thing. We've been dealing with having to source a lot of the different parts. If you guys remember from the last video, we dropped the transmission. We found that this thing needs a full clutch kit. It also needs the flywheel. While I was in there, I noticed that the rear main seal was leaking a lot. So we had to source a rear main seal for this thing. Now the rear main seal really was my biggest problem because we were able to source the clutch kit, the slave cylinder with the throwout bearing, the flywheel. But when it came to the rear main seal, I called Dodge dealership. They told me it was discontinued. They could not even get it. They did order me one at first. I waited a week for it to come in and it was the completely wrong one. I don't know why they sent that to me. But after going through all this trouble trying to find it, it seemed that nobody had this part. So we had to dig through all of the internet to try to find and locate this rear main seal. Now we did end up finding a company online. I think it was like viperparts.com or something like that. I'll leave a link in the description or I'll leave it right below here on the page. If you guys are looking for Viper parts, definitely check out that website. Anyway, I checked eBay. I mean, every online site that you could think of to try to find the rear main seal for this thing. The only place I could find it was this website. And so, you know, I was kind of speculative at first. You know, I really wasn't sure why this place had it when nobody else seemed to have it. So we went ahead, we bit the bullet, bought the part, ordered it. It just came in. I have it over here on the bench. And I guess that's the first thing we're gonna do because really that's what's been holding up this whole project is the rear main seal because while we were in there, we really wanted to change the rear main seal because it was leaking so bad. And of course, that is the very first thing that needs to go on before anything else can go on. We cannot put the flywheel on. We cannot put the clutch kit. We cannot put the transmission. We can't do anything until we get the rear main seal in this car. And it's been probably 3 or 4 weeks. I can't even remember. I've lost count of how long I've been waiting since I last dropped the transmission. Again, this car has been sitting up on all 4 jack stands for the past few weeks with the transmission out over here on the ground, ready to go back in. I've just been waiting for parts. Anyway, there's no time to waste. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here we are at the workbench. We have all of our parts laid out. You guys can see we have, this is the flywheel that they chose. It is a Fidanza aftermarket flywheel. Looks really nice, really pretty. It's got this kind of green coating on there, but if you read the label here, it tells you to wipe off this green coating. I guess you just use some kind of maybe brake cleaner or acetone to wipe off this green coating. I guess it's for maybe rust prevention. I'm not really sure. Looks really nice. Feels really high quality. Here we have our clutch kit, the pressure plate, the clutch disc itself. Over here, we have the alignment tool that it came with. Also the pilot bearing, we're gonna be replacing that. And we have the clutch slave cylinder complete with our throwout bearing. And if you guys can see over here, we have our alternator, which if you guys remember from the last video or the video before, whenever I started the vehicle up and I revved it a few times, our alternator started to spark. Then after that, it no longer charged. So we have a replacement alternator. That's on our list to do. Oh, over here, we have the clutch pedal. Now this one took some time, but we were able to find somebody that actually had one for sale on eBay. And as you guys can see, this one looks much better, almost brand new condition clutch pedal. So we're gonna be going back in there to pull this clutch pedal assembly out so that we can replace this clutch pedal. If you guys remember from part 4, I believe, where we replaced this, oh no, I'm sorry, it was part 5, where we replaced this clutch pedal and because the bushings here were destroyed, but when we pulled it out, we noticed that this hole here was wallowed out, so the steel was ruined. So we have a replacement clutch pedal ready to go back in. And finally, if you guys look over here, this is the rear main seal that I pulled off of the vehicle. As you can see, it comes with this plate here and the seal is installed in the center. Now, again, what I tried to do was locate either the whole complete thing or just the seal by itself. Because at first Dodge told me that it only came complete with the whole backing plate. When I found some part numbers, I called them back up to try to cross-reference it, but they still could not find just this seal in the middle here. So I was kind of stuck trying to locate whatever I could. And luckily we found that Dodge Viper part website that I showed you guys. And let me show you what they sent us. They actually sent us this Velcro rear main seal kit. Let me take it out of the bag. So here's the rear main seal, which I'm hoping is going to fit. Because honestly, I was not expecting them to send me a Felpro part, because I checked through the Felpro catalog and I could not find a listing for the application of this vehicle. So I'm not sure how they came up with this part number, but I will say that, you know, I've kind of run into that before with this car. If you guys recall, I did replace the throttle body gaskets on this car, and I could not find the listing under the catalog for Felpro. But when I went to the catalog and I tried to match up the gaskets, I did find an exact replacement, and it was under a Jeep inline 6-cylinder 4.0 liter or something like that. It was for another Chrysler vehicle, but it was the exact same part. It just wasn't listed under the Dodge Viper. So I'm hoping that this may be kind of the same thing. These guys may have already figured out what part number fits for the rear main seal on these Gen 1 Vipers. So if you guys are curious, or if you're in the market for a rear main seal and you own one of these first generation Vipers, this is the part number that you're looking for, or at least this is the part number that they're going to send you, and I'm hoping that's going to fit. If you look in the bag, it also comes with a gasket for like the backing plate. But you know, I don't think this gasket really was meant for this vehicle, because I don't think this rear main seal was meant for this vehicle. If you take a look on the back here, you can see that this rear main seal was actually for, it says here, Chrysler 8.4 liter and 8.3 liter. So it may be for like a Dodge truck or something like that. Either way, I think the seal itself is the same size. If you take a look at it, I mean, it's more of a rubber coating on the outside here than the factory steel one, but you know, that's typical. Sometimes these rear main seals aftermarket are manufactured a little different, but if you take a look at that, it looks like it's going to fit right into that plate. So I'm hoping that's going to work. The other thing that I wanted to show you guys is when I went to pull this plate off, I noticed that one of these bolts was missing and it was broken off inside of the plate. So there was quite a bit of oil leaking from the oil pan, where the oil pan connects to the backing plate here. And luckily the little bolt here that's, or the remnant of the bolt that's left in there, is actually really loose, so I can just kind of remove it with my fingers. So let's go ahead and pull that out. And then we're just gonna run to the parts store or the hardware store and try to find a replacement bolt for this. That's garbage. So first things first, let's go ahead and try to replace this rear main seal. I'm gonna go ahead and pop it out and then try to pop in the new one. Give it a couple taps there, a couple taps here, and there we have it. Let's go ahead and match it up to the new one and make sure it is the same size. Yeah, looks like this seal should work. Let's go ahead and install it. Feel it out and make sure this thing is even. So what I'm doing here is I'm kind of just running my finger along the edge of the seal, and what I'm feeling for is the lip of the housing or this plate versus the height of the seal. So what I want to feel is that it's even all the way around. The seal is not cocked sideways or installed incorrectly. I feel pretty comfortable. Let me go ahead and install this rear main seal. All right, guys, so as you can see, I went ahead and I bolted up the rear main seal plate to the back of the engine. And if you look, I put a nice thick bead of silicone all the way around. Let me show you guys something up close here in the center. This is where the pilot bearing goes. As you can see, I've already attempted to remove it using my slide hammer, but you know, the slide hammer really didn't work for me. All it did was kind of pull the guts of the bearing out. I still have this outer shell stuck in the back of the crankshaft. So I went ahead and I picked up a pilot bearing removal tool from Harbor Freight. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about. All right, guys, so here we have our pilot bearing removal tool. You can see it's like a little 3-jaw puller. Has these tiny little jaws that go inside of the pilot bearing. Then we have this nut here that we can use to pull it. So I'm gonna go ahead and shove this into what's left of the pilot bearing, which is sort of the case. And then I'm going to set this thing up. Feels like we got a pretty good bite. I'm not sure how well this is gonna work. Let's hope for the best. I'm gonna start tightening the little nut in the center here. Came out. All right, guys, so unfortunately that tool did not work for me. This race is really stuck in here, or this shell of the bearing. At this point, I think my only option right now is probably to try to either crack it with a chisel or maybe use like a carbide bit and try to cut a slit in the sleeve right here.
A few moments later.
All right, so fast forward, I went ahead and I used this little carbide bit on my drill. This little carbide bit is good for grinding down or filing down metal. And so I essentially just kind of stuck to one little spot right here on this little shell of the pilot bearing. And I know it's ready to come out because while I was grinding at it, it actually spun around. So I think I can just take a little screwdriver now and maybe pry it out. You guys can see how it's split right there in the middle. Let me just kind of slide it out. You can see it's already coming out. Here we go. And there we have it. Here's the shell of our old pilot bearing. You guys can see I just went ahead and I filed it down with that carbide bit. Now let me go ahead and clean up this hole and install our new bearing. Okay, so just a quick recap. The first thing I tried to use when pulling out the pilot bearing was this 5-pound slide hammer using this little hook adapter on the end. And you know, that really didn't work out too well for me because all that happened was I ended up pulling the guts out of the bearing and leaving that little sleeve inside of the crank hole. So I drove over to Harbor Freight and I picked this bearing puller or pilot bearing puller tool. You guys can see it has the little 3 jaws. And you know, this I think would have worked out for me if I would have started with this. Because again, like I said, I pretty much destroyed the bearing using this, leaving only the shell. And then that shell that was left behind really didn't have a whole lot of lip to grab onto. So that's really why this slid out. I really do think that if I would have tried to use this to begin with, this probably would have worked for me. But you know, in this case, there just wasn't enough to grab onto. So I still recommend this product. I think that it's pretty good, especially because it was only 20 bucks at Harbor Freight. So my last resort was using these little carbide bits. You guys can see these things are nice for digging through metal really quickly. I just used them on my drill. You guys can see the little sleeve of the bearing where I used that carbide bit to just kind of chew right through the sleeve. And once the sleeve broke apart, this thing came right out. So if you guys have tried everything and your last resort might be to try to use one of these. Now, I have heard of some people using the grease method where you fill the hole in the crank with grease and then find like a bolt or something that fits in the middle nice and snug, and then kind of hit it with a hammer, and the hydraulic pressure is supposed to push the bearing out. Well, that really didn't work for me because I couldn't find a bolt that fits snugly through the center of the bearing. So really, this was my last resort. So if you guys don't have a set of these carbide bits, I would definitely pick these up. They come in really handy whenever you need them. Now, this set I actually picked up at Harbor Freight for 60 bucks, which is actually a steal because I had bought a set of these a couple years ago from the Mac Tools truck, and I think I paid like almost $200 for them. It was crazy. I mean, even the slide hammer, this slide hammer I got it from Mac Tools was 300 bucks. And while I was at Harbor Freight, I found they had the exact same tool set, same blow molded case and everything for like 90 bucks. I mean, I kind of feel like I got ripped off with Mac Tools now because they're probably made by the same manufacturer. They're just packaged differently. But anyways, that's a story for another time. Like I said, if you guys are having difficulty removing a pilot bearing and you just need a last resort, try using one of these carbide bits. It worked out really well for me. Let's go ahead and swap out this slave cylinder. It's kind of stuck on there. Give it a little bit of persuasion here. There's the bearing. Man, that thing's stuck on there. There we go. Install our new bearing and slave cylinder assembly. Make sure it's lined up properly in our little bolts. Now zip these down. We're good to go. So it's time to install the flywheel. So what I'm going to do with these bolts is I'm going to go ahead and give them a dab of Loctite. Just like that, not too much. Install all of these bolts and then we'll torque them down to spec. All right, so I'm going with a torque spec of 50 foot-pounds. That's what the information I gathered showed me. So let's go ahead and do this. There's one. Two.
A few moments later.
All right, so apparently before we can put our clutch on, we're going to have to take off this green coating. I'm going to try to use some brake clean. I've got some non-chlorinated here. So I'm gonna go ahead and spray it, and hopefully this will be strong enough to take it off. Oh yeah, that's working. That should just about do it. Nice and clean. We're ready to put the clutch on. Okay, so here's our clutch disc. Of course, when we install this, the raised portion is going to be toward the outside and the flat portion is going to be on the inside. So it's going to sit on the flywheel like this. Then we're going to take our alignment tool that came in the kit, and we're going to slide it through the center here and try to get it right into the pilot bearing. Right there. We are lined up. I'm gonna go ahead and put the pressure plate on, torque it down, and get everything put back together. But I think at this point, I'm going to go ahead and set the camera to a time lapse. I'm not going to explain every single detail of what it is I'm doing, because quite honestly, I'm running out of time here, and I really wanna try to get this car done as soon as possible. Real quick, guys, before I put this thing back together, let me show you something. If you take a look up here, you can see where the ignition coils are located. There's one right here, one right over here, and the coolant temperature sensor is located right here in the middle. So if you guys own a Viper and you're over at a shop getting an estimate for replacing an ignition coil, don't be surprised when you see how high the quote is, because looking at this thing, I don't even think that it's possible to do it removing the intake manifold. I mean, it is, but you would still have to remove this. So I think it's actually a lot easier to go ahead and drop the transmission and do this while the transmission is out of the way. Now you see all this green stuff up here. That's not from any coolant leak. That was from the paint that was on the flywheel. When I hit it with the brake clean, it kind of flew everywhere. So, you know, that's not something to worry about. Anyway, I just wanted to show you that real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and start putting this thing back together. So let's cue the time lapse.
One eternity later.
All right, guys, so let me apologize for jumping ahead. The car is done. It is put back together, and I'm ready to get this thing out of here. Now, I know I skipped a lot in the time where I left off, but essentially, I got the transmission back up into the car, put the drive shaft, put everything back together. I did run into some issues. I'm not going to go into details with that. Issues with the U-joint hold down strap bolt. One of them rounded off, and I could not find that part. Nobody had it locally. I went back and forth for a couple days with the auto parts because they showed a few of them on their computer by application, but when I got them, none of them fit. They were all a different thread. Of course, it had to be special ordered online. The other thing I went ahead and did was replace the alternator. If you guys take a look over here, you can see we have our brand new alternator installed. I went ahead and I installed the air filters, all of the air ducting, the tubing. Also, I went ahead and I installed the clutch pedal. I got the old pedal up on the table over there, as well as the old alternator over there. But, you know, I showed you guys in the last video how to do that. It was pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Didn't take very long at all. And now that I got it back together, the clutch feels great. I did also have to bleed the clutch, which honestly was really easy to do because I only had to gravity bleed it. So now that the car's back together, I was planning today on taking it back over to the car lot, making the 30-mile drive from my house to the car lot over there. Sorry about the noise in the background. My neighbor just turned his lawnmower on, so decided to mow the lawn as I started to shoot this video. Anyway, funny enough, I wanted to drive this car today, and that was my plan because I really need to get this car out of the garage because I have another car that I'm working on that I need to pull into here. But I did notice that the gas gauge was reading empty, the gas gauge over here. And so I wasn't really sure if there was any gas in the gas tank. Now I know they removed the gas tank to replace the fuel pump, and I think they probably put a couple gallons in there. So I wanted to be able to make it to the gas station from my house. So I got a little 2-gallon gas can over here. And as I started pouring gas into the gas tank over here, or into the filler tube, this thing actually started leaking. And when I say leaking, I mean this thing is just pissing out all of the fuel, all of the gasoline onto my garage floor. And when I looked inside of here, I noticed that, well, let me try to open this thing. There we go. When I looked in here, I noticed that this tube was completely rusted out. Now, I don't know if you guys can see in there or not. Let me turn on the flashlight here. All right, let me see if I can open this up. You guys can probably at least see a little bit inside. But if you can't, I'm telling you right now, this tube is completely rusted out. And if you look in there, you'll see this white kind of rock in there. Let me see if I can focus in a little bit. Okay, I don't know if that's showing up on the camera or not, but you can see that white rock right there. That's actually what I believe to be some type of putty, because it looks like somebody at some point in time tried to repair this filler neck. So take a look at the filler neck under here, and you'll see that there's a patch of this putty right here. There's also another patch of what looks like JB Weld. I'll get you guys a better view of that. You see these patches right here? Yeah, so somebody tried to patch this filler neck, and that's still not holding up. This thing, as I'm pouring the gas in, is just leaking out of this filler neck. You'll probably notice that I finally went ahead and I removed that ugly top and those fake windows that were on this thing. It's a really nice day, so I was really hoping to make the drive, but unfortunately that's not gonna happen. Now, I do want to drive this thing at least around the neighborhood, maybe just a few miles within the reach of my house in case this thing breaks down and I have to push it home, because I do want to make sure that we don't have any other issues for quality control reasons. So that's my plan for today. So check this out, guys. I'm over here airing up the tires so I can go on my quick drive around the neighborhood. But when I went to air this thing up, this valve stem or the valve core started leaking. You guys can hear it. And I went ahead and I replaced it because I have some valve cores, but even though I replaced it, this thing is still leaking. And I noticed that it's actually leaking from around the valve stem itself. It's leaking through here also in the middle, but it's leaking around the edges too. So this thing's gonna need a whole new valve stem. Just another thing to add to the list of the many problems with this car, and why I'm not sure if I'll ever even be able to drive this thing. All right, guys, so here it is, finally outside of the garage. I did try to add the rest of that fuel from that gas can, but I don't know how much of it actually made it into the gas tank. You guys can see it's just dripping all over the floor there. But like I said, I just want to take it around the neighborhood. Again, just guys, take a look at this car. It is just beautiful. It does need to get washed. It's very dusty and dirty, but you know, let's go for a drive first. After a quick wash, she cleans up really nice, guys. Check that out. That purple is actually really, really nice. I did not expect the purple to look this good. I guess being covered in dust and dirt all those years, all it took was a nice quick wash. Check that out. That is beautiful. Anyways, guys, at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and end off the video. That thing did a number on my hair. It was like being in a blow dryer. Anyway, like I said, the car, it's up and running, drives great. But at this point, I really don't think that I'm going to attempt to drive this thing back to the car lot. I think I'm gonna go ahead and call a tow truck driver to come pick it up and have them tow it over there, just because I don't want any problems on the ride there. And like I said, I can't even really fill this thing up with gas. They did locate a filler tube, but it's gonna take another week for it to get here, and I really don't want this car sitting in my garage for another week. Like I said, it's taking up space, and I have a lot of other work that I need to get to. So the car, unfortunately, has to go. I mean, I am glad to see it up and running. I'm glad I was able to finally drive it. It feels great. I actually am starting to fall in love with this car. And honestly, you know, if in the future, if my budget ever permitted, I'd probably pick one of these things up. And that's coming from a guy who's a Ford guy. I'm a Mustang fan. I'm not so much of a Dodge fan, but this car, I mean, Dodge really hit the nail on the head with this one. Rest in peace, Carroll Shelby. He really knew how to design them and build them. And this here is a classic example of what Carroll Shelby was all about. Straight up performance. Try and put the biggest engine on the smallest chassis or frame you can find. Make it look beautiful and hella fast. A car like this is something that you will never ever see again come out of a major manufacturer facility. This car has nothing. No ABS, no traction control, no airbags, no safety features. It's just raw, pure power, and it is built for the driver enthusiast. And that, to me, I think is why people love this car so much. And after getting to drive it and become really intimate with it, because I've been inside and out of this thing, I can tell you right now, I see why people are falling in love with this car all over again. Anyway, like I always say, thank you for watching the video. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it educational, informational. at least entertaining. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.